All right. Hello and welcome to Dharma Science Radio. My name is Ian. I'm a 1-3 emotional authority generator who's been in the human design experiment for about 7 years or so now. It's been a really profound experience in my life, and I simply love talking about it, sharing my experiences, and having communion, having real experience and encounters with other people, with other souls, with other interesting characters. And so now, my friend, if you would kindly introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me on, Ian. My name is Raj. I'm a 2-4 emotional manifesting generator, triple split, right angle crossover Maya 2. And I completely share your sentiments there in terms of, loving to meet other souls who are also in this human experience, but also that have had the privilege of, bumping into or finding human design. And yeah, just really looking forward to sharing my experiences so far. And we are here for liftoff. So yeah, it's great to be on. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. That's great to hear. So, what actually was your very first encounter with design like?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. You know, with all the content and all the podcasts and all the interviews that we hear about human design, one of the most incredible things about it is the various different ways, all the way from A to Z, that people can find human design, and it can be from any avenue at all, and it can be really peculiar and really nuanced for some of those experiences. With mine, it was beginning of winter last year, and we could say there was some extra turbulence in life at the time. It was a couple of years of intensity with the lessons that I was learning, just life experience and life unfolding in its own way. And I was at a bit of a crossroads in that moment, and I really realized that I'm going to have to weather this storm basically on my own. And astrology in general and horoscopes is something that we all know in the West, and we all have some sort of experience with it, but we take it seriously or we don't take it seriously, depending on if it resonates with us. And I thought in that moment, let me try and get some guidance from something, and let me start with astrology. Let me start with my star sign. And so I was looking for astrology apps in the App Store on my phone, and the algorithm, as it can do, gave me a suggestion for an app. And I quite like design, and I like branding, and I like good aesthetics. And I saw the logo for one of the human design apps. Not knowing it was human design, I just saw this logo and I was like, this looks interesting. I tapped it, and obviously, I'd read the description, and it started speaking about this user manual or a roadmap for life. And then it mentioned human design, and those two words jumped out at me. I went over to Google, did the usual, what's this all about? Put human design into Google, ended up on the Jovian Archive website, and the rest is history really after that.
Wow. And so, when about was that?
This was beginning of winter last year, around September time. It was September time. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's incredible. So, it was simply finding it online at a challenging point in your life when you're looking for some kind of guidance or something. You find astrology, and then there's this application with a unique design to it that catches your attention. It's always interesting what physical designs, what aesthetics kind of just sometimes it's like, huh, what is that? Like, let me learn more about what's going on there. And yeah, that's really incredible. I remember there were some interesting applications I found back when I was first starting. Since it was before COVID, there was less interest. There were less podcasts about it. There were less applications out in total. There were less things going on. And so it's funny, I'd spent my entire life like researching and investigating and trying to figure out everything I possibly can about life and how this thing works, this human experience works. And I never found human design until suddenly I was in this 2-story house surrounded by people all practicing human design and various other practices like sound healing and hydrogen water and different techniques. And suddenly there was just this deep immersion, and I guess I'd been waiting for this my entire life.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I actually remember, and we're talking many, many years ago now, I actually, similar to you, in my exploration of, the esoteric and mysticism, because it's always been something that I've been very drawn to my whole life. I actually remember having been on the Jovian Archive website, more recently when I found human design. I actually landed on Jovian Archive when I was much younger, and none of it really stuck out to me. None of it resonated with me. I clearly wasn't in a point in my life at that time where the human design synthesis was supposed to find me, and it was supposed to take me on the human design journey. Which is why this whole concept of the timing needing to be correct, it is such a key part, and it simply wasn't my time then. So yeah, we all find it, or it finds us, as and when we need it. It can be a critical point in our life. It can supplement where we are, and just steer us and put us right back on track of where we're supposed to be. And yeah, I'm just grateful for that whole experience.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I echo the same sentiment that timing is everything. Like in my investigations of youth, I had ended up buying the Gene Keys book twice, and I never actually read it. Like something brought me to it. Like I need to have this. This is an important resource. And yet I think it's the nature of his communication. I feel that it speaks very much to the second line nature of things. And it feels like it speaks to the natural flow of things. And as somebody with a predominance of first lines in my experience, I really want the mechanical, nitty-gritty, detail, ironed out pieces and parts to put together into a logical mechanical framework. And so even though it'd been around me for years and years and years beforehand, it wasn't until it showed up in my physical life that it was like, oh, wow, there's really something here. And it was almost kind of nearby the whole time. And yet I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah, and conversely to your the first line nature of investigation and really getting to the bottom of something, as a conscious second line on my side, when something has gripped a second line to where no, they actually feel driven to do the deep dive into that education when the second line isn't really built that way. That's how okay, there could be something here which is going to be able to serve the second line nature, as you mentioned. And that's how it can really grip a second line, because most of the time as a second line, things may not really grip in that way to where I feel that urge to really do the deep dive into something. And when the things like human design and even Gene Keys come along, and you're like, well, I'm gonna immerse myself into this knowledge, then there could be something there where you want to get into the depths of something. So yeah, but Gene Keys wise, that's something which you naturally will find that in the human design process. It can be something where you're looking at other modalities maybe, and I think Richard Rudd has done an absolutely phenomenal job with Gene Keys. The thing that stands out much a lot with Gene Keys, which is maybe a contrast to human design, is just the sheer vocabulary and the essence of how the siddhis are presented in there, to where you feel that the nature of bliss through the text. And I think if material can make you feel that way just in the way it constructs the I Ching in its own way, well then I think it's really captured something. And I know that's something which is unfolding in the world now, and it really takes some time after you read your own Gene Keys holographic profile. I'm still exploring it. You really have to look back on the knowledge when you move forward a little bit and be like, right, that's what it meant. And that's the same with human design as well. You really have to go and live that experience to really see what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the living of the experience is really everything. And something I find very interesting about the two systems is that it's as if human design comes from the darkness and Gene Keys is coming from the light. And so for me, the Gene Keys are a beautiful supplement and addition, like an add-on to the human design mechanics. Because at this point, I couldn't even possibly imagine what my life would be like if I wasn't trusting my response mechanism and waiting for clarity. It's kind of like, well, as a 1-3, I trial everything out, and I'm always going to find that weak spot. I'm going to find the fatal flaw, and I might have to learn firsthand, oh, that's not something that works. And so I have to deal with that a lot. And so the human design mechanics, this type strategy and inner authority really became something that it's like, this is literally a way of life. And when you start stepping into it, there's, at least for me, there's this eternal invitation to dig deeper and deeper into the experience as time goes on. Because I had a major health crisis show up that was it started off acute and small, and then it became like, okay, it's been a month and I'm still dealing with this problem, and I'm not digesting food correctly, and this is starting to disrupt my function. And for one reason or another, I became aware of my PHS, my primary health system. I went, oh, okay, well, I'm going to stop drinking anything cold. I'm hot thirst. I'm going to stop everything cold. I'm going to have hot water all day, and I'm going to aim for hot, wet foods like stir fries and soups and stuff. And within about a week, it was almost entirely gone. And now years later, from that initial primary, like, wow, this is real, I felt it directly in experience, and other people can attest to it, that things change. And over the years of this, now it's at that point where, wow, I'm really learning that I might be able to find some kind of temporary pleasure from, say, ice cream and cold foods or dry foods and different things. Even something as simple as a Ritz cracker. It seems innocent.
Yeah.
And yet, when I eat that kind of food, it's actually feeding my ignorance. It's feeding my homogenized life from the inside out. And then when I eat hot food and drink hot waters, and I'm working from the hot and wet field of nutrition and food, and that's what's coming in, within a day or two of being more strict with that, I can feel like, oh yes, I'm lightening up from the inside. And then I can have something heavy and feel myself slow down. And witnessing the different symptoms that show up over time with this process has been really profound.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, not as much of an extreme example in terms of, you know, my digestion as well. But when you bring something like PHS to somebody who is new to the knowledge, you say to them, you know, it's actually about the environment or the circumstances of how you're eating. It hasn't really got anything to do with the nutrients of the food in terms of how we're taught in the homogenized world. You're going to get a lot of looks with that, right? Because it's like, that's not anything that we've been taught our entire life. It's always about what is it you're putting into your body. It doesn't matter if I'm sitting out in direct sunlight. It doesn't matter if I'm sitting in a quiet place. None of that makes any difference. But as you mentioned, you were going through your own patch in terms of health. And we know how important it is that our body is able to absorb nutrients in the correct way. And so, you know, if it's a hot day and you're outside having ice cream and really cold drinks because that's what everyone else is doing, well, you could be doing more damage to yourself. But then by experimenting with hot thirst, you're able to reverse some of the conditioning that you had in that moment. And you're better off with it, health as well, than all the rest of it, right? So it's like you were able to actually have that lived experience and not just go off of the attestations of other people who are telling you to do it. As you mentioned, logical system, it's lived experience. You can find out for yourself. And you know, there's a scale to the PHS regimen as well, right? Like even with me, typical manifesting generator fashion, you come across human design, you want to start skipping around the knowledge, you want to start fast forwarding the deconditioning process. And we know that's not how it works, but I skipped forward to like, what's this PHS stuff? You hear rumblings about it in your initial experience. And then, you know, you're trying to unpack the PHS elements of it as well, but it might not be your time yet. And so as I've gone through my human design experience, I've started to see how the PHS is starting to bring me to a more refined cognition, and how that is beginning to serve my ability to articulate wisdom and to share my lived experiences. But yeah, you know, to hear about reversal of you know, health conditions is not the first time we've heard this in human design.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just in that moment, I'm remembering that for about 5 weeks, I was very strict in my PHS, and I witnessed my productivity at work ramp up by like 40% for that month or more.
Wow.
And I even recognized when I took a step back and I kind of slowed down a little bit, I had some neutral temperature food, some PHS incorrect food, technically speaking, and I actually witnessed, whoa, my eyesight in this moment actually got a little bit worse. And so what that meant to me is that in that span of time wherein I was honoring my PHS, my eyesight was actually slowly getting better.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. And yeah, it sounds otherworldly to people who maybe aren't in their experience. But once you start to see the evidence, you know, proof is in the pudding, well, then, you know, you can't deny it. And I mean, you can experiment in that way to where follow your PHS and then go against it. You start to see some of the nasty side effects that come along with that, along with the bloating and the indigestion issues and all the rest of it. And then you very quickly realize, I'm going to realign with my PHS here because I'm experiencing a few steps back here by trying to test or challenge what it is that my body needs. And so, yeah, you start to see the benefits thereafter. And yeah, it's great to be able to see that happen in real life, in real time as well.
Mm. Mm. Yes, 100%. And to further that, because it really is another level to the experiment and the experience and the process of inner authority and type strategy. Because you can try on inner authority and type strategy. You can practice with waiting for your inner authority in these things. And you can feel a bit of relaxation form inside of yourself. Or you could witness, wow, I never would have expected that to happen. And you start to see differences in your own life as you become more anomalous. You become, out of the ordinary, statistically deviating from the mean. And then PHS, when you start to actually do this process, it's really not something to dabble in, because I feel as if I'm a firsthand account of that process, because I have very strongly leaned into it and I very strongly leaned out of it to the point of making myself powerfully sick at different times. And something I'm realizing is that even I'm living near somebody who is classically medically trained, and my communication with them is challenged in a sense because they have this strong foundational classical background. And yet now what I'm going through, I can only see it as a differentiated growing pains, basically.
Wow.
And so it's like the normal diseases don't cut it. They don't count for what's going on in the same way because I'm out of the ordinary now. And so being able to trust on my own inner authority that there are times when indulgence in things that are technically incorrect is actually a correct thing to do. And part of that is the experience of life. Like, especially as a third line that I'm here to really be sure of what does or doesn't work. Like as a 1-3, I'm testing the foundations. And I tell you what, this PHS stuff is incredible. It is very profound. And there was something I wanted to say based on what you had said a moment ago. There was this notion of, I'm not sure what it was. The train had left the station, but there was something you had mentioned around the PHS and stepping into it quickly or not, or rushing the process. And so this rushing the process thing, it's really fascinating, especially as the manifesting generator structure, because part of your correctness is being able to skip steps and then perhaps hopefully go back and make those corrections down the road, being able to make those adjustments mid-flight in that sense. And so being able to see that perhaps there's a moment where getting really excited and really diving in deep, it might not be the time for 100% solidifying and having this miraculous overnight transformation. And yet it can be the time for the personality to go, wait a minute, there's a bigger picture. I need to know what I'm looking at. And give me this foundation. Give me something to look for. And then after that, it's like, oh, I can relax a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. We live in a society that doesn't encourage waiting really for anything. There's this ideology of instant gratification and wanting something now and seeing the benefits and having things immediately. And you bring a tool like human design to somebody and it doesn't support that way of thinking or that way of life at all. It's a long-term lived experience with an entire process that goes behind it, which will be completely individual to that person's experience. And so you come in from the homogenized world, you stumble upon human design, you have all this information thrown at you, and the first thing you want to do is, well, now I want to know it all and I want to see the benefits now. But as you start to dig your heels deeper into the knowledge, you realize, like you said, your personality is going to want to get ahead of itself. But you could say, I guess, the design side is going to be like, well, hold up there, buddy. We have, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever your age is at that time, of conditioning here where our cells are homogenized to a way of life and a standard of living that has been conditioned upon us since birth. And now you're saying to me that I need to change this. I need to do this in that way. I need to wait for a response. No way. We need to get out there and we need to go and build, and we need to go and get what it is that we need right now. And we're going to be frustrated in that experience, and that's correct for us. But all of that needs to be shed. All of that needs to be torn down. You need to hit the reset. You need to build yourself from the ground up, and you need to realize that resistance is a product of a conditioned lifestyle. And yeah, I mean,
yeah, that's so good. That's so good, because it's right there. And there's a beautiful irony, there's a beautiful joke in there as well, because in that description, I'm hearing the mind going, well, I'm used to doing things this way, and now you're telling me I have to do things a whole new different way. And so that's frustrating and challenging and difficult. And that's not quite the most accurate portrayal of the reality of what's going on, because there's actually a step backwards first. Because first, we're letting go of these things we're used to doing. And then what happens after we're letting go of these habits that don't actually serve us, then there's a natural unfolding of the satisfaction of truth. And when we have those moments and those tastes, like as generators, like, whoa, that's real satisfaction. Frustration, I mean, whatever. I know what satisfaction feels like. This is good stuff.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a good point. The other thing I think we can touch on in terms of type, strategy, authority is, I believe you're emotionally defined as I am in the solar plexus. And there's this notion of no choice in human design. And, you know, half the world is emotional, right? And that probably means that the majority of those individuals are going to be making decisions from the peaks or the depths of their emotional wave. And that's why we've got a lot of the mess that we have out there. One of the things that I've been contemplating recently as a thought experiment is, because no choice is such a point of contention, and people have their own expression of what no choice means. And, you know, I think it's about 30% of people that are sacredly defined. Keep me honest here. I think it's about 30% that are sacredly defined, and not emotionally defined at all. Or am I thinking of the spleen? Either one.
Well, I believe the sacral. Let me see.
Yeah.
I believe the sacral is like, what is that? That's like 70% of people, and then 20% are projectors, and then around 9% are manifestors, and around 1% are reflectors.
Yeah, okay, that's it. I think what I was referring to is people who are sacrally defined but not emotionally defined, so non-emotional generators and manifesting generators. So their truth comes from the now, and their body knows what their truth is in the now. And then you have people who are spleenically defined. Again, their truth comes from the instinctual survival of their body in the now. And so it's much more likely that as they live their life without human design, they already live their life likely being led by making their decisions in the now, because this is what society supports. However, as someone who is emotionally defined, we now have a choice to make after we find out through human design that we have a patience mechanism, is what I call it, before we get emotional clarity. We have a choice as to whether or not, after human design, we can make a decision still at the peak or the depth of our emotions, and then have to meet the resistance of that decision, or we now have a choice with the lived experience to wait for clarity before we make a decision. So I think in particular, people who are emotionally defined, after we have the knowledge of human design, we are still given a choice, because I can leave my house today and I can feel something in the moment that's making me feel great or making me feel terrible, and make a decision based on that. And that's going to be my experience until the day I die. Or I can leave my house today and feel an emotion at the peak or the depth of something that's happened to me, and wait to make my decision and meet much less resistance. So I think emotionally defined people always have a choice still, even after human design. And we have to live with that for the rest of our life.
Yeah, that's incredible. You shared so much in there that it's like so many different responses happened within me. It's like, hold on, stay present, because I did a touch of more modern research into the choice or not, at least from modern like neuroscientific perspectives. And what I'm seeing is that they're saying habitual decisions, like ordinary basic decisions, the brain can process it. say 10 seconds or so before it actually happens. Before the personality has decided I'm going to do this, the body has already told the personality, you're going to do this. And then the personality says, oh, I'm going to do this. And then when it comes to novel, unique decisions, that opens up the doorway for the choice factor to come in, the conscious awareness to influence what direction we're going in. And then I just want to say it was very generous of you to say that for people that are acting existentially in the now, say splenic authority and sacral authority, it's most likely that they are honoring it. I think that's very generous of you to say that. And I think to some degree, there's a yes and there, because to some degree, that's a reliable mechanism. And so if they're paying any attention at all to the inside of their life, they'll see it to some degree. The thing is so many people are caught up in the survival program. And so that's what probably makes it look more correct than it is from the outside, because the survival program, it is that sacral authority. It is that splenic authority. Those belonged and they came from the old worlds and the old survival programs. Whereas this emotional authority, this is a whole new thing that flies directly in the face of all the old school strategies. Because old school strategy was stoicism, this is don't let that lower emotional feeling, that simple ignorant motor, don't let that thing push you around. And then now that we're actually in the process of developing solar plexus awareness, which is really multidimensional in such a magnificent way, like something I'm seeing about the emotional wave, at the very least within myself, is that it is not one static fixed wave. It is actually a multi-dimensional wave process. And so I could be high in my wave relative to something that's, say, going on physically around me. And I could actually still be in more of a neutral space relative to certain other things. And that neutral clarity around other things, like no matter how high I am on my wave, it is very, 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 very unlikely I will ever want to be punched in the face. Very simple clarity, very simple. It's almost always there. It's basically always there. And being able to know the field of my emotions in that way gives me this deep sense of what clarity is actually consistent. And I'm able to see my wave from a bigger passenger perspective than simply being really identified with this vehicle and this personality going through all these thoughts and feelings and life experiences and, oh, what do they think about me? And, oh, did I really do the right thing? And all this kind of stuff that can go on. And being able to see all of that as part of the movie.
Yeah. Wow. So many insights there. There's so much to unpack there. And similar to how you were feeling when I was speaking, I felt that as well. And it feels great to be able to relate on that level of the emotional wave. It sounds like someone who's been in their experiment for a very long time, who can bring that wisdom back down to people who are just starting out with their human design experiment. Which actually that raises a good point on something. I think, there's this whole focus on the initial 7-year deconditioning experience to regenerate our cells and to basically strip away wherever we are in life, and then to really have our lived experience thereafter. And this is something that's backed by science before human design, that cells regenerate every 7 years. Having been in my position to where this is a system that I found last winter, meaning I'm approaching, I think, my 8th month now, it's that there's value in people who are finding human design at any stage of their life and who may be at any point of their human design experience, to be able to get these viewpoints from somebody who maybe has just found human design on that day. Come on, let's have a chat. What are your thoughts about the system that you've just found? And then to speak to them a month later and say, let's do another conversation. How's things going a month in? And as much as there is this focus on the 7 years, I think there's incredible value in getting these conversations going with people who are at many different points of their experience, who maybe are nowhere near their 7 years, to see, well, what's your lived experience now in that first year where there's all this chaos that's going on, all these things that are being stripped away from you, which you thought you were so attached to before, but realize that maybe they weren't really serving you in the first place. You're on that rocky first year to where things are going to fall away, things are going to come into your life, but what does that actually feel like, and what's the experience of that? And if someone were to find human design and they're 3 months in or they're 6 months in, or maybe this can serve them to be like, okay, so there is benefit and there is practical value to human design, even if you're nowhere near the 7-year process, or even if you're not even through your first year yet.
Yeah, oh my gosh, absolutely. I think that's one of the most practical and important things, is to be able to know that, especially if you're working with somebody who knows what they're talking about and is willing to be present with you in this moment and to see where you're at and to perhaps give you the piece of information that could be the most beneficial in that moment. Because this is the biggest thing, is that you can't rush this process. You also can't slow it down. And it doesn't mean that this is now something, oh, I got to make sure I don't do this. No, this is now something wherein, even if you're thinking that, that's part of the process. This is something wherein you literally couldn't stop it. You literally couldn't make it go faster. It's like a river flowing down, and you can't like push it uphill. I mean, you could try as hard as you want, it'll never happen. And so every single journey is utterly unique. It's something I've heard from all kinds of different people that have at least, say, been aware of human design and practicing or experimenting to whatever degree is correct for them. There is perhaps judgmentalness around, well, you've only been in your experiment for this long. Like, you couldn't possibly be ahead of me.
Yeah.
As if there's a linear scale from which to guide or judge all of this stuff. We do have individual unique signposts we can talk about, and that's when we start getting into the independent and dependent variables, and then the personality and design resonance mapping of differentiated activation. I mean, there's a whole lot of unique individual details we could get into. The challenge is, what is there to say universally? What applies to basically everyone? And as somebody who's going through a strong fifth line theme in his life, like for me, it's very important that I can be practical.
Yeah, wow. I was just about to say, in true fifth line fashion of universalization there, and you've just mentioned you're going through a fifth line theme there in terms of how can we take this and really make it practical. And the good thing about type, strategy, or an authority is you're given the framework to make it practical anyway, because those are the 3 most practical elements which will realign you with your fractal anyway, as long as you can stick focused to that. One of the things, because you mentioned some really the more complex elements of human design there, to which I'm nowhere near as of right now anyway. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you maybe is, with your entry into human design being from when you were you were at a house somewhere and there were people there who were in various modalities, where's the majority, or where's been the most impact in terms of your learning with human design, apart from some of the basics that maybe you were taught from that experience? Where have you found the most benefit for yourself in terms of getting stuck into some of the more complexities around human design? What's been the greatest source of information for you?
Well, to literally and directly answer the question, the most powerful source of information for me has been literally just listening to Raw. That was the first and foremost, that what really got the ball rolling, because I found online there were different Facebook groups and I got access to hours of material, and I started listening, and it just really gave me a whole new foundational perspective on life. And then, so that was one stage. And then another stage is this whole experience of going through life and having all kinds of wild encounters. And, so much power goes through this experience. You can meet the most radically empowered individuals you've ever met. And I have been upset at people. I have been really upset at people for behaviors. And then as I have sat with those behaviors, as I sit with it, I realize what they've done is correct for them to do. Like, it's not like everybody revolves around me. And so being able to accept that, it's like, I cannot possibly be mad at you for being true to yourself, regardless of what impact that has had on me.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I almost think that there's almost two sides to that as well. There's one side of it where it's, were they really acting to the truth of themselves, or were they acting from their not self? And we don't have to get into that, because there are elements. Our design is our design from the day we're born to the day that we transition into the next stage of the process. However, even without knowing human design in any way, shape, or form, there will be pockets and slithers to everyone's life where they do live their design. There are times where they live their definition. There are times where they live their profile naturally anyway. It may not be refined, or the frequency may not be as precise as it could be, but there are going to be pockets of their life where they do live their design, but there's also going to be a much larger element where they're just living from their not self as well. One of the mantras which I've recently sort of made, and something that goes through my mind a lot, and it's just something that I just replay when I need to, is no mind, no blame, no choice. And that, I feel like, encompasses so much of the homogenized not self world that we're surrounded by. And some people say ignorance is bliss. Some people say you can blame people for their ignorance. Some say that you can't. I truly don't think that you can. It is a real no blame situation. And as soon as we're looking for blame, I just feel like it becomes a mind personality thing. So if there's anything that I've taken away and it sort of helps me in my daily life, it's no blame, no mind, and no choice. It's done wonders for me. So
Gosh, that's so great. It's nice having real conversation like this, because it's like, okay, there's different avenues and different trains leaving the station, and which one gets to take center stage? Because it's like the not self. It's that is another factor to even piggyback off the previous question of what has been profound and beneficial, is my relationship with the not self is transformed, and it continues to transform, because it's not something we can get away from. Much like no mind, especially if you're like a defined ajna person, if you don't happen to be somebody like me with a meditation sense in your personality, motivation, tone, like I'm here to actually get into that no mind space. Some of us are really here to get into that space. And for others of us, we're meant to have a mind that's buzzing all the time, and that doesn't have to be a problem. It can be like the weather. It's like, oh, it's raining today or it's sunny today. It's not like either one causes me to suffer. It's simply the weather.
Yeah, I think what you said, pack an umbrella, for those. Yeah, that's one of yours. Pack an umbrella, regardless. Yeah.
Right. And that's really like, and even on the flip side of that too, it's a classical teaching is that meditation is like packing the umbrella for the rain, or putting on your jacket and snow pants for the storm. Because life is going to bring us all kinds of different circumstances and situations. And so having some form of meditation, and this is something that for me, it's personal for me. And then also I believe it's very universally practical, because meditation is not what we think it is. It doesn't matter what we think it is. Meditation is not what we think it is. It's the moment we don't think that we've touched a sense of meditation. The moment we've realized, oh, hey, I was lost in thought, and I recognized that spiral. That's like one bicep curl of meditation, one repetition of meditation. And so being able to have something to pay attention to for the mind is really important, especially for strategic personalities. They really need to be busy in all these details and all this stuff. Whereas the receptive personalities just pay attention to life. And this is something I've recently heard from Ra in studying PHS and rave psychology more in depth, is that if you have rightness in basically any of your variables, that can be an invitation for, if you feel ready, try out your PHS. Because the thing about rightness is that it does not come out with the fullness of its potential without the correct diet.
Wow. Okay.
The strategic can at least begin pulling and playing and strategically gaining advantage of things without the diet being correct first.
Right. So it's almost like with the receptive mind, it's the refinement of that cognition of having the right variable arrows really becomes its optimized state once you're able to feed the nutrients of your body correctly, is what I'm hearing here. And that's when you get that as a byproduct of correct nutrition.
Right, because the thing is, on the most fundamental level, what we're doing when we eat food, when we're around other people, when we sleep either in the aura of another person or alone, is that we're receiving conditioning. And we're always receiving conditioning by life. There's no way to stop it. And so this is why strategy and authority is so important, is because that allows you to know from the inside out what conditioning is healthy and good for you and what conditioning is depleting and destabilizing for you. And so when you're feeding your unique difference, when you're eating according to your PHS, when you're trusting that you're in the right environment relative to your authority bringing you to that environment, because this is something that's very important, is that there are technical, mechanical, hardwired truths. And then there is also the field of light, and 99% of everything we think about is basically the field of light. We're caught up in the hologram, the illusion of separation. And that's the whole world. Everybody, if you say you're not, they think you're crazy. And so there has to be this ability to truly have compassion for the not self. So for me, I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm not trying to eliminate my not self. I'm not trying to eliminate your not self. I'm being able to clearly see the difference between your highest truth and the lowest material survival of what's keeping you alive at the same time. And I'm not judging either end of the totem pole as superior or inferior. They're both essential.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like there's that space in the reality between the not self mind that's about to take hold, and that gap between that moment and the moment of bringing it back to the body, and not becoming lost in that space, in that gap between where you may end up and where your body is aligning you to the fractal, or aligning you back onto the right direction. And yeah, it takes some training, like you said, 1 rep to be able to be aware of the fact that this is my not self that's about to creep in here. That's the mind, but I need to bring myself back into the body. And you realize that your body is actually trying to pull you back away from that. And that comes with time of being in the experiment, because before then it's like mind, going to be led down through what the mind wants. And as we know, head ajna is not connected to any motor, to process inspiration and all the rest of it. And yeah, we know how damaging that can be. But yeah, the right conditioning, I want to touch on that point as well, because this is textbook stuff really. But defined spleen versus undefined spleen, you can have an unhealthy defined spleen from someone operating in their not self, and an undefined spleen that comes along and attaches themselves to that defined spleen. It's either going to give them the correct conditioning, or it's going to give them the incorrect conditioning. And it's really up to the person with the undefined spleen to be able to identify this place, person, thing, object, habit. It's not serving me to my higher self. And that becomes not self-conditioning in itself as well. But the other thing as well is the cleanliness and the frequency and the precision of having lots of definition, but that can also be conditioned, and you can also operate from the not self. And I've heard it spoken about here and there in terms of the learning that I've done so far in human design, but I don't hear it spoken about enough. Just because you have lots of definition in your design, it does not guarantee that you will use that definition, or that definition will be expressed in a way that is going to be able to influence those who have open centers in a way that is healthy and clean for the development of that individual as well. And that's a really key point as well, because when I first came to human design and I saw my human design chart and I saw all these channels and all these centers, I was like, oh, cool. So I'm defined in all these ways and I have a very specific way of operating. But it takes a little bit of learning thereafter to realize that none of this is operating how it should be operating. And all of it is being conditioned and operating from the not self. And that's can have an impact not just on yourself, but the people around you as well. It's very important that you're able to understand that element as well, I think. Because a lot of emphasis is put onto the open centers in terms of how they're here to become wise, but yeah, you're not guaranteed your definition in this life, I don't think.
No, absolutely not, because the thing is the definition simply means there is a fixed energetic exchange between two different energy centers. And so those open centers, they become, a natural attraction. And that's why there's so much of a focus on them, is because they're naturally attracting and pulling us into, and we all share that as a unified field of nonsense, basically. And also the great potential for wisdom. And then at the same time, there's those fixed channels that are very specific, very, very, very specific. And so it's fun because I take two very different perspectives, at least two very different perspectives on, like, say, definition or exaltations and detriments. And
Right.
say if you don't happen to have an exaltation or a detriment, and yet you find yourself resonating to one side or the other and going, yes, that's what I've seen in my life, or that's what I'd really like. And on one hand, I like to say that if there's some kind of a line that's particularly challenging or heretical, or you really don't want to deal with that, it's really unpleasant. On one hand, I say, you know what? Now you know. That's part of who and what you are. Can you accept who and what you are? Can that be okay? Even if it's not pleasant, can that be okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then on that other hand, there's this sense of, I look at the line and the planetary activations, the exaltations and the detriments, and I see them as homogenized perspectives on the negative and the positive vibration for that gate, for that line. So what is the highest truth? What is the lowest truth?
Mm-hmm.
Bearing in mind this is Ra's perspective on that, coming from the colorblind voice, which I think is something a lot of people don't remember or recognize, that it was colorblind in an infinite black and white absolutist hierarchy. And so there's a lot of genius in there, and there's also a lot of misinformation. And that's part of what builds the stability of the material world, which has been a real profound journey. I've been learning more about Neptune and about how the misinformation field, being part of the stability diamond of our unique awareness resonance, is also ripe with spiritual opportunity.
Wow. Yeah. It's just that veil, that Neptune's veil, that is for its purpose is to put that veil over what may sit on the other side of that. And that's something that's happening a lot with the mutation that we're going through as well, and Neptune playing its trick, so to speak. But one thing I wanted to touch on there, which I really valued, was the exaltments and detriments. Once you come into the knowledge and you've got your type, strategy, authority, the mind is great to get stuck into the knowledge for the sake of the mind, just to keep you distracted with the knowledge whilst you live your type, strategy, and authority. And you see a lot of fear mongering and a lot of people online who have found human design, who are reading their design chart, absolutely getting familiar with it. It's really important to know who you are, but they get obsessed with the nuance of these exaltments and detriments, and think they start trying to plan where things may start going wrong in their life. And it's like, your design is going to manifest in terms of your type, strategy, and authority, but not all of your exaltments are going to manifest, and not all of your detriments are going to manifest. If you're living correctly, your body has everything that it needs mechanically to deal with what may come what may, as long as you are already living from the place of your inner authority and your strategy and that truth. It means that anything which the planets are imprinting upon us, either side, unconscious or conscious, come what may, and you will be able to weather that storm, and you will get what is correct from you and for you anyway. And so getting really caught up in those detriments and starting to worry and fearmonger about it, it's not self to me. Honestly, it's just what I've experienced.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And I'd also further it even that manifestation, you said it's not always going to manifest. And I think that's a part of a very powerful truth that we don't always remember, is manifestation. This is something that, at the very least in my conception of manifestation, this is the higher order. This is a continually changing, constant, quick, this is manifestation itself, manifest reality. It's very transformative. It's where metabolism comes from.
Wow.
It's like the first energy center. Serotonin begins to produce in the throat when the womb is developed, and that's the very beginning of life. And that's very different from, say, the sacral center, which is generating the life force of life, and it's going to make itself very clearly known. Is it manifesting in a satisfied or frustrated manner in this moment? Whereas the exaltations and the detriments, the thing is, the not self gets the absolute worst of the detriments and the exaltations alike. whereas the true self gets the absolute best of even the greatest mistakes and the greatest detriments. It still gets the light of that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There's just moments here where you just really want to sit with what it is that we're unpacking, and this one's definitely going to require a rewatch afterwards to glean all the wisdom and all the gems that are falling out of this, because yeah, it's all good to live the experience and to gain all the knowledge, but it's another thing to be able to share that. And I think one of the biggest benefits and one of the things of most value that we can get from human design, and we are moving in that direction, I think, is we just need people to share, and we're in the best age that we've got for sharing right now in terms of how the experience is going, because that's the mind not connected to a motor, is here to share what the body's lived experience is going through, to have this conversation, to sit down with someone, anyone who is as passionate about this, and to be able to validate and speak to this experience, because we don't know how long we're going to have the privilege of what we have today for. And so I think we really need to start grasping these opportunities, which is why I was more than happy on 2 or 3 reschedules. Things were happening with me, things were going on with you. There was all sorts of turbulence going on, opportunities coming our way where we had to rejiggle this. And lo and behold, we still managed to make this time and space for us to share in this way, because it's an important thing that needs to happen. And, the state of evolution that we're in right now knows that this needs to get out there. So, yeah, really happy that we're able to come together on this. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Likewise, I've been having a blast, and it's always a joy to be able to share in the experience of communion, wherein we can throw jewels at each other with no concern over the value. Just best value. What's the best value I can give you? Just continually, what's the highest truth that I can share with you in this moment?
Yeah.
And that's always a joy. It's always a joy. And like, we had to reschedule 2 or 3 times until coming to this moment. And then even today, the Wi-Fi on my end was going slow for a while, and then it stabilized and brought this moment together. And yeah, it's just such a joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I will touch on your point in terms of bringing the value, because I only very recently discovered you have some amazing content on your YouTube channel. I didn't know there was a wealth of knowledge on there just outside of the conversations you have. But for example, Kendrick Lamar and the Kanye breakdowns, I have to give you your props there, because I don't really see many people jumping on what's like. You get the Donald Trumps, and you get people who are jumping on the bandwagon of human design analysis for some of the more mainstream things that are occurring. But to see you jump on things that are happening in real time, like with the Kendrick and the Drake feud, and then to see what Kanye doing his thing in the media cycle again, the not self and the open centers are really very amplified when you see it in the celebrity realm. Because I literally had to pause the video multiple times when you were doing all of Kanye's openness, and it was just like, this is him. This is him. This is exactly what he does. And I was just in awe that it was the simplest keynotes on those open centers can show you the extremities of where those open centers can take you, for better or for worse. I mean, so yeah, I'd highly suggest everyone goes and checks that out, because yeah, it was genuinely awe-inspiring, and just shows the power of what a mechanism like this can do for us in world analysis, not just individual, but to have some observations to that knowledge as well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, because I had a lot of fun doing that kind of work, because I really want to make the knowledge more approachable and visible to the eyes of people who are looking, because I've learned that really is one of the things that makes us so different from the animals. And then it's one of the things that makes humans so different from each other, is the fact that we see the world differently. And our seeing is either open or fixed in different ways. And so there is simply such an incredible amount of detailed nuance that can go into anything. Being able to simply look at the surface and then just open a conversation and say, for myself, listen to myself talk. Just listen to my voice do its job, because that's completely separate from my decision-making authority. Like, I make decisions from a totally different mechanism than what does the talking for me. And so I get to watch myself talk just like anybody else. And so you put a chart in front of me and I'm just like, well, there's this and there's this. And there's, oh man, you see this? I'm seeing this. And it's the beauty of keynotes along a truly solid, logical foundation. Because when you know how to string along keynotes to make sentences, you can say almost anything. You can put those keynotes together in almost any way. There is basically no limit to the creative potential within a single human life. There is no limit. And I want to be able to bring that to life. I want to bring the limitless truth that we are to life. And in order to do that, what we do is we shine a light on our limit. We shine a light on our limitations. And in becoming aware of those temporary truths, the doorway is open. There's a whole new experience right in front of us, you know, like with the eyes of a child and yet the wisdom of an old person.
Yeah.
The wisdom of an elder.
Yeah, I have to say, if that's what your aim is in this current moment of your cycle right now, you're definitely, looks like you're doing your bit to make sure that this is being shared, and those eyes of that kid-like enlightenment or that experience of something new is definitely coming across in the content that you've been producing. And I really like that you brought up the whole keynoting aspect and the poetry and the art of keynoting, because that was another thing I tried to throw myself into when I saw that Ra had some lectures on the art and poetry of keynoting. Again, this is very early on in my experience. I was like, I'll get this nailed. I'll get all the keynotes together and start to do readings and give myself a reading. And once you actually listen to the kind of experience that you need with the knowledge before you can even get to a place of being able to keynote, like you said, words into sentence structure, that in itself is like a whole nother language. And so the way that you were able to display that on the public YouTube videos you posted of your analysis, it clearly shows that with some lived experience and with the studying of the keynotes, it's something that comes over a period of time, but it is something that you can become proficient in. And then it unlocks a whole nother world of being able to understand the knowledge, because it's all keynoting at the end of the day. And that's how you can make it practical. And yeah, I mean, I can only hope that if it's meant to be for me, that I'll be able to get to an element of keynoting to that experience, definitely.
Oh, I truly believe that each and every person, see, this is the thing, it's like, for me personally, I was basically born to talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
like,
it shows.
Quite literally, I found myself able to give keynoting when I was like sleep deprived and not in a good space, and yet I could watch myself give keynoting within 6 months of human design.
Wow.
And that's when I started giving readings, because it's like, you know, I could be half asleep and I'm still giving good work by my own ear. And so what am I doing holding myself back? I could hold myself back my entire life, and I don't want to do that. And so each and every person has their own unique trajectory that's going to align them in life and their own unique path. And so that's why I appreciate you saying, if it's correct for me, I hope I'll be able to. Because the thing is it can be correct for anyone. The key factor is, are you able to actually trust your own inner authority for making decisions in your life? Because it doesn't matter how, like, say, how much studying and cramming I could try to do into my head to make sure I know how to strategically access everything and do all this words and stuff. It's not about that whatsoever. Because if I didn't live my truth, it doesn't matter how well I know the system, it wouldn't land the right person, the right place, the right time. It doesn't matter how poorly you know the system. If you are living in your truth, the keynotes will simply come through. And who cares if they're Ra's words? Who cares if they're yours words? They could be somebody else's words. And depending on your design, maybe it will be your words coming through. Maybe it will be somebody else's words coming through. Like I have an open ajna. My thoughts are not original. I'm a remixer. You know, I shifted up and put my own spin on things that have already been created. I don't have original thoughts. I just put my own spin on it. And so I practice putting my own spin on it as much as I can.
Yeah.
And that's a 1648. I just keep practicing. I just keep practicing, and I just keep practicing.
Yeah. No, awesome. And I'm looking forward to see what other remixes and what other inspiration comes your way to filter through for the future. But yeah, definitely keep at those, because you know, with the niche of the knowledge that we're speaking about, what, you know, in your current journey of making it practical, it's not about necessarily capturing or riding out what's popular right now, or trying to do what's cool or viral. But if there's an opportunity to give a human design twist on what it is that's going on out there in the world, and what it is that we're dealing with, it only takes a few people to come across that knowledge and see you doing like a Drake or a Kanye or whoever it is that you're doing, for them to see, actually I can see this because it's a large example of this system on a stage in the front lines. And then it's practical for them to see and be like, well, if this is the power of the design on someone like Kanye, what could be the power in this for myself? And before you know it, they could end up down their own rabbit hole in human design, and their journey can start as well. And another thing you touched on that I really liked was around coming across the language and the tool set of human design. If it's correct for us to be able to then keynote and to then do keynotes and readings for other people, when you first find human design, it's very easy to get excited about it. And the first thing you want to do is share. And it's like, that's sort of the first proof of, just because you read about inner authority, being emotional inner authority and being very excited, you haven't actually learned your authority, because you're now trying to share the knowledge off of your excitement to people. Some of them are going to look at you and be like, what are you on about? And it depends, it doesn't matter if it's family or close friends. Some people will look at you off your excitement and be like, I can see you're passionate about it, but none of this is hitting home for me. And some people will join that excitement with you and will be really enthusiastic about it. But after you learn what an inner authority is, and after the knowledge starts to baseline itself, and after you come back to a bit of a baseline of that wave, you realize that you're just going to let people come to you and ask you about it if they want to hear about it, rather than try and push anything onto others. And so it's like, you can learn about an authority and strategy in the initial sense and still be very not self, because you think you've learned the knowledge, you think you're living it. And there's a long, big gap between learning the knowledge and necessarily living it. And even that has to be something that is reconfigured in us as an individual, I think. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on inner authority there and keynoting specifically.
Yeah, and for those of us with the emotional inner authority, I mean, feelings are no substitute for clarity. Like, I've started to see more and more in my own experience how simply because I feel strongly about something, now that means that's not clarity necessarily. Because I've been upset at something, I've sat in meditation for half an hour, and then I was still charged. And so I saw that as the signal of go forward and do the thing. And then I gave my frustration share, and then people got upset at me. Because the thing was, is I realized an hour after I had made that share, I didn't even know what anybody was saying or anything. I was just out there doing my thing. I realized, oh, I guess there was nothing to say. There was nothing to say after all. But a half an hour of sitting meditation wasn't enough to balance the charge, because I was strategically trying to take control and plan my life, but I'm a receptive personality. My strategic design will specifically find the fatal flaw. It'll find that straw that breaks it, and it'll break it if it's weak.
Yeah. Wow.
And I want this to be less about myself, though. I feel like we've been talking too much about myself here. I want to get more about your experience here in this. So can you share something about maybe a human design moment in your life, a moment wherein you perhaps could see, I could go this way or that way, and maybe I'm used to going this way, but this time I'm going to try that way, or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me has been to understand, because although we are emotionally defined, we are generators. You're a generator, I'm a manifesting generator. So the source of our response still comes from the sacral. There's a period thereafter where there may or may not be an emotional wave to then wait after that decision is being made or not. And, you know, there's been times, a few months after I found human design, towards the beginning, 3 to 4 months, where I was trying to learn what it feels like to return to the body and actually try to internalize what a sacral response even feels like. Because up until that point, nothing's happening in the body. It's all happening from the confusion of the mind. Define head to ajna takes me down all sorts of paths without being attached to any sort of motor. We already know the mess that comes with that. And so the first thing that I was trying to be consciously aware of was around what a sacral response feels like. Now, around that period, again, this was around the beginning time that I found human design, so there was a lot happening in my life that I was responding to incorrectly, which was then, emphasizing the chaos that I was going through. I was repeatedly receiving an external event that was happening and finding its way towards me, okay? And my mind and my solar plexus was in haywire. And old me, before understanding this concept of a sacred response, would have let my mind take and my emotions take over together. And maybe I would have thrown myself back into whatever that event or stimuli was and have myself repeat that cycle again of ending up pretty much nowhere that I wanted to be. And even though my mind was saying that, well, what if you respond to that? Maybe it'll be okay this time. Maybe it'll be better this time. Again, this was a repeating event that was occurring. My sacral, this was when the first time where I truly felt that my sacral was physically, it was a physical no to that. It was a physical no response to what was going on in that moment. And this was happening again and again over a period of weeks. And where I really wanted to engage with it, I really wanted to attach myself back to whatever it was that was going on. I actually felt for the first time that I had listened to the sacral response of my body, to where thereafter, so much of that resistance fell away. So much of what it was that I was experiencing in that period fell away. And this was, we have to think, this was like an 18 months experience before that point, where it was a whirlwind of things breaking and not working out in chaos. And so that was the first time I was like, this sacral response stuff is really real. And getting the sacral response no, even though my emotional impulse was on a high, didn't give into that. I didn't give into that. I let it float away over a period of weeks. And then on the other side of it, I was like, I'm so glad I listened to my sacral. And that was a very teachable, learning, real life experience for me, which I've carried forward. And I'm now becoming a lot more aligned with what a sacral response feels like. And, you know, once you set yourself on that path, it's like, okay, well, I'm there now. And no matter who doesn't like it, that sacral is going to be what leads me at first and foremost, as long as I'm responding. And then there's an emotional wave to wait out after. So, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. That's wonderful to hear. So am I correct in seeing that you're a triple split and your sacral is not connected to your emotions?
Correct, actually. Yes. Yeah. So again,
What is your what is your sacral channel?
my sacral channels are, it's root to sacral. So 360, so channel of mutation. So one of the format channels, and 4253, so channel of maturation. Both of those are most 3 parts unconscious, 1 part conscious, by the way. So
right,
yeah,
there's mutation through cycles there, double format, and then that emotion. And that's what makes it so interesting, because the strategy and the authority coming together, and then you have very clearly to see, well, my strategy is over here, and then my authority, that's over here.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, to witness those two things play out over time, to witness it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
So my question is, do you spend time in group aura?
Yes, I do. And even that in itself requires a balance, right? 2-4 profile, want my own space, want my own time. What's the keynote? Leave me alone. Doesn't matter how many times we're called out from that unconscious fourth line, it can be a leave me alone a lot of the time, unless that call is really correct for us. So now there's a whole nother element to this that I have to balance. I have to balance my own time where my bridges are not connected. And so then things get stuck in 3 different places of the body. But here and there, a call will come along for me to leave my second line, the embodiment of that second line, which I take, and creating my own space, to make sure I'm getting the contact time externally to bridge all of those splits. And even that in itself is a process, right? So what is the correct call for me to go out and get those bridges split? Is it the correct conditioning for me to go and get those bridges split? Or am I just being outside for the sake of it, in an environment for the sake of it, that may not be bridging my splits correctly to where I'm getting a clean energy? I'm going to carry on with this, but something you said there was really profound. And it's probably something that, we said that there's no strict timeline to how these things need to work out, but my strategy and my authority actually being split off from each other is something I'm going to have to go away and really take away and sit with, because for some reason, I'm sure I've come across that on my design. But in the experience I've just spoken to you about, which I had in the first 3 months of finding this education and knowledge, there's a lot for me to unpack there in terms of the authority and my strategy. And my sacral and my authority not being directly connected there. And what the implications of that can be if those bridges are being connected by somebody, while now my strategy and authority are speaking to each other, and that's going to change the way that I I am as well. So environment's going to be a really big thing there. So thank you for that, because that was a real key insight that I'm going to take away from this. But yes, I found out how bridging the triple split can be very important, but then also managing that and balancing it with my own time as well is an art in itself, it feels like. So yeah.
Yes, and my simple reminder invitation in this moment is to remember that you don't need to necessarily strategically balance it all with your conscious thinking mind.
Right. Wow. Which it sounds like
because it's another trick. It's another trap the mind uses. Well, I need to make sure I'm controlling my body to the best strategy and authority, wherein the body's like, hey, I'm already living it. Just let go, watch the movie. It's a fun one. Believe me. Like,
wow. Yeah. And there we have a live example of mind taking over. Mind is always there. And you've just brought me right back again. So yeah, thank you. Mind will try its best.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you for being open to that, because like I'm a strange person like that, wherein I am willing to always bring it back to that. Well, in this exact moment right now, we can get closer to the truth. And some people have that, like somebody show up and give that opportunity. Some people get upset. Some people can be really annoyed. Some people can be like, you're still trying to do that thing? And then other people are like, wow, like this is fun. I like going to the next step in my conscious evolution. Like I like remembering the bigger picture, and that's what I'm here for. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, using that undefined headspace there to really take some of the madness that can come from the defined head and realign that back to where it needs to be. And yeah, there's an example of some real clean energy in terms of you being your experiment for a while now. So yeah, but yes, triple split and that's my experience of how that can compare.
And the importance for the triple split to have time around the group aura, and it doesn't always need to be like around specific people. It doesn't need to be interacting with other people whatsoever.
Yeah.
It can simply be going through a shopping mall and just people watching or something. Listening to headphones as you walk through the forest even could do some of that.
Yeah.
Because the animals bring all their different qualities too.
Yes, true. They all have their own design as well, as we know, design of mammals and all the rest of it. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I'll be honest, I have experimented with doing the aura showers, which I know they've been called, in terms of just taking a seat somewhere in a public space or doing the walk through a supermarket. It can serve to definitely help move the energy around the body, and I have found that at times. What I found to be an even more optimal group and setting and environment for me is if I'm in a group environment where individual free expression can also be a part of that bridging of the splits. I think bridging the splits in public aura where there isn't any expression going on can have its benefits, but it doesn't always, for me anyway, this is just me, it doesn't always allow whatever the free expression needs to be to move through the body in a healthy way, and it can still sometimes stay stuck. Whereas if I'm in that moment and I'm in a place where I can share safely, or I can share with free thought and free expression, it can almost like speed up the movement of that energy through my body, to where even after that experience, I will still be able to feel the lack of resistance and the free flowing nature of myself. Whereas if I just go out for a walk somewhere and come back home, doesn't always serve the same results for me. So that's something I have been able to experiment with, just through my triple split experience. Yeah.
That's a good point. I think it's really important to be able to express oneself, and it makes me think about free speech and how a lot of that has been under fire lately. And there are people that, well, so many of us, especially in the group environments, there's always some kind of a cultural conditioning around how to behave, and very rarely is it be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. We've lost that. Yeah, absolutely.
Bringing it back. One breath at a time.
Yes, indeed. One rep. Yeah. It's profound.
So, this has been great. I've actually got a session that's coming up relatively soon for myself I need to prepare for. So perhaps we can open towards the closing remarks. And
sure.
Do you have any kind of final thoughts, or any place where people could find you, or any kind of projects you're working on you'd like to share, or anything like that?
Yeah, one of the things that has been something that I found more recently is, there's a lot of talk out there in terms of AI and a lot of fear around what that means to us and the direction we're heading in and how with the 2027 shift that's occurring, a lot of things are going to be pushed onto AI because it's here to serve that purpose for what's coming next. Um, but I think there's an opportunity here to take a lot of what human design has been speaking about, and in the correct way. I think there's an opportunity, and it's something I'm experimenting with at the minute, to actually provide a synthesis of the learning. Right, if it's done carefully and you're able to train it in the correct way, there could be an opportunity here to really make this, to take a lot of the information and crunch it and re-synthesize it to make sure you remain with that source material. And there could be a learning opportunity here to bring the knowledge to people who maybe want to learn some of the more advanced topics, but get lost in some of the information that's out there in terms of what it is that you have to really understand before you get into the more complex elements. So it may be something there that I'm exploring with some of the large language AI models that's out there. So that's something I'm going to see that the way it takes me. I'm not really available in terms of online. Online isn't really my forte, and it's not been for a while. So yeah, you've got to catch me on another one of these if you want to hear what's happening with me. But the last thing I will just maybe leave everyone with is, you know, we live in a homogenized world. They say to be the person that the younger you wanted or needed in that moment, and I think that's such a profound thing because, I would have gone back and told myself that you are about to enter a homogenized world, which is going to try and condition you to become somebody that you're not from the moment you step foot outside of that door. And that's going to give you the most issues in your life. They're going to try and take away the essence of who it is that you are. And the only thing that human design can do is bring you back to your individuality. It can give you a decision-making tool that is going to be correct for you. It's going to eliminate, it's not going to make anything easier in terms of the way life is going to unfold, but it's going to give you the tools that you need to remove some of the resistance that comes from some of the things that we're going to have to deal with and be put up with. So I'd just say, be yourself. And yeah, things are going to get interesting in the future. So yeah, you need to differentiate if you can, because it's going to be the only thing that can probably save you will be your inner authority type and strategy. So yeah, that's what I'll leave with. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I want to echo that thanks back to you for being here. It's been a real pleasure exploring and sharing in some aura energy and diving into what's available in the moment, and even to be online here in this moment, since it's not the biggest space for you. I mean, I know the real world is, well, I spent a lot of time on the internet, and yet when I discovered how much more profound human beings in the real world is compared to how limited the digital world is,
Yeah,
it's always drawing me back. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope to do
yeah,
this again sometime, and when I'm further along my experiments, and yeah, hopefully this was of value to people. So yeah, thank you.
yeah, thank you. And if you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye for now. That is so funny.
Mm.